But here's what I've discovered a lot of people do. They stress out over things to the nth degree. And I know that's a silly example, but it's kind of like life is bringing you all kinds of dishes, okay? You know it as well as I do. Some of them you ordered, okay? So you got no one to blame. But some of them you didn't order. It's just the dish that life brought you. And, you can stress out and say, well, I don't like every little thing about it. I don't like the context, the contours of it. I don't like how it looks. I don't like the presentation. I don't like the texture. I don't like the flavor. I don't like the amount of spice. I don't like the color. I don't like this. I don't like that. But, honestly, life is not going to give you everything you like 100% all the time. Hi, friends. Today I want to spend some time with you talking about handling stress. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that many people today are wrestling with stress, and I'm one of them. And so what I wanted to do is take some time and unpack some strategies for handling stress that I have found have been transformational, not only in my own life, but also in the life of the clients that I work with. Oftentimes the truth is you can't tame the wind, but you can turn your sails. And what that means in plain language is that you cannot tame all of the challenges that you're facing and all of the stuff that you're dealing with. But what you can do is you can turn your sails. You can change how you're approaching things. And often in that change is the transformation that we're looking for. Now, stress fundamentally is kind of the interaction between two big things. The first is the perceived demand that you have on your life, right? And this is actually quite subjective. What I mean by that is, you'll look at some person who may not appear from the outside to have a lot of load that they're carrying, but they perceive it's like huge. And then what you have to marry that to is their perceived ability to cope. And so when you think about it, you got two elements in stress. You've got the demand and my perception of the demand on my life. And then you have the ability that I've got, but also the perception of my ability. And when you have a mismatch between ability and demand, or the perception of ability and demand, what ends up happening is you end up in a stress state. So imagine a person who feels like they have a decent level of ability. That's their perception of themselves, which is totally fine. But they perceive that the demand on them is far greater than they can handle. Well, of course, that person's going to end up in a stressed state. On the other hand, you'll see another individual who may be carrying far much more, or maybe they're carrying far much less, but they perceive that the demand on them is adequate to the ability that they have. When you have a proper match between the perception of the demand on you and the perception of your ability, you're not going to end up in a stress state. But when there's a mismatch between your perception of your ability and the perception of the demand on you, you will absolutely end up in a stress state. Now, when you believe that you can handle stress, you end up saying, I got this. But if you can't say that, then what is happening is you are experiencing a negative element of stress. I'll tell you, when somebody says, I've got this, they're kind of saying, I'm bent, but I'm not broken. I'm discouraged, but I'm not defeated. I'm faltering, but I'm not falling. I've got this still. I'm in crisis, but I'm still calm. I'm under stress, but I'm not shattered. But when somebody is under a place of stress in the extreme, now I'm bent, but I'm also breaking. I'm discouraged, but I'm also defeated. I'm in a place where I'm faltering and I'm falling. And so, listen, it's not that there's a bad stress that's going to come into your life and take over. So much of it is around your perception of what it is you can handle. But whatever it is, you've got to figure it out. Why? Because chronic stress actually impacts your brain. And it impacts your body on so many levels. I'll tell you, when you have chronic stress, not only does it increase your mental illness, but it actually impacts your concentration. And so the focus that you need in order to accomplish all the load or the demand that's on you, you can't even figure that out because you're so stressed that you don't have any concentration. I see this with people all the time. And, I think a lot of people, if I can be blunt, actually confuse stress and ADD. They say to themselves, well, I just have ADD. I just have ADHD. I can't focus because I'm the ADD guy. Listen, I was first diagnosed with ADD, at that point, I'm so old that they called it hyperactivity disorder. I was 7. Okay. So listen, I get it. But I think for a lot of the time in my own life, I told myself a story. Well, I just have ADD. That's why I can't focus. But a lot of it was how I was responding to stress. And I had allowed stress to take over my life. And what happened is I wasn't able to concentrate. I wasn't able to focus. It's very difficult to focus if you have stress. Why? Because stress actually shrinks your brain. It kills your brain cells. It hurts your memory, And what it does is it increases the level of mental illness that you might be experiencing. Now, I don't want to give stress a horrible name. Did you know that there's a good type of stress and there's a bad type of stress? Now, the good type of stress is called eustress. That's eustress. And this is actually a scientific term, eustress. And it's the kind of stress that comes on your life that pushes you enough that allows you to stretch beyond your current capability, but it doesn't press you or stress you to the breaking point. That's a healthy thing. I'll tell you what, you in a completely unstressed state will never go or grow anywhere, right? And so we need a little bit of stress on us, a little bit of pressure in order to trigger a growth process. I mean, literally, that's what happens when you're lifting weights, when you're doing resistance training. You're putting enough stress on your muscles in order to trigger regeneration of those same muscles so that you can build some muscle mass. But if you put too much, well, now you're talking about, literally massive muscle tear, which is not good for you. And so that's the bad type of stress. And scientists call this distress. So you got eustress, which is good. That kind of pushes you a little bit. It inspires you a little bit. It challenges you a little bit. But then you have distress where now it's severe, it's prolonged, it's actually a negative place of worry and fear and limitation. And so what we really have to do in our life is understand that stress is not all bad. But what we have to do when we get from eustress, the good stress, to distress is actually have a strategy for handling it. Listen, I've got you today. I want to share with you some principles for handling stress well, because I actually have experienced a lot of stress in my own life. No, I'm not no more than like the average person, that's for sure. I'm not trying to, sing a sad song here, but I can tell you over the years, I've tested different strategies that have actually made it worse. And then I've tested them against strategies that have actually made it better. And I'm not going to in any way say I'm stress-free, but I'll tell you what, I have not been in a place of distress for a long time. And actually the load on me has increased, but the stress level has gone down. Why? Because I've learned a few things about handling stress well. And so I've got you today. Let me share with you some principles for handling stress well. The first one is if you're going to stress, and you are, then you might as well stress over your own stuff, okay? Over your own stuff. Now, here's what's interesting about stress, and I see this sometimes in my friends and people in my faith community. Sometimes I see that with business partners or people that I work with, is they're all stressed out, but they're not even stressed out about their own stuff. They're stressed out about everybody else's stuff. It's kind of like they've got their own monkey on their back, and we've all got a monkey or two hanging out on our back, but then they take on the monkey of everybody else around them, and pretty soon they're carrying like 19 monkeys on their back, and they're wondering why they're so stressed out. Listen to me. Your life on its own has enough stress. You don't have to take on the stress of everybody else out there. Now, I know some of us are wired as caregivers, and that's a beautiful thing. Hey, thank God for the caregivers in our lives, but there's a fine line between being an intelligent caregiver who offers that level of empathy and compassion where it's needed and when it's needed, and thank God for those people, and actually taking on other people's stuff, other people's stress. Can I encourage you, if you're going to stress, make sure you stress over your own stuff. You are having a hard enough time owning your own journey, and so don't feel like you need to own the journey of everybody else around you. That's not rational. It's not sensible. It doesn't make a good logical sense for you to do that. And so if you're going to stress, make sure you're stressing over your own stuff. The second thing I've discovered when it comes to handling stress is to embrace the good and minimize the bad. Now, this is kind of like that old principle. You know, my wife and I, we just came back from a beautiful vacation in Orlando, and we go down there quite a bit, and we're so excited because in the community where we have a place, they open up an Olive Garden, and I'm Canadian, and we're Canadian. And I only say that to say, I think in all of Canada, there's maybe 5 Olive Gardens. Maybe there's more, I don't know. But in our community where we live, there's like 1, and it's nowhere close to being as good as American Olive Garden. Okay, now, hey, Canada's got Tim Hortons. All right. But the United States, they got Olive Garden. And it's interesting because we went in there, we had this wonderful experience, and everything was fine. But there was this one dish that they brought out. And, hey, no disrespect. It was a great meal, but I didn't like everything about it. There was nothing wrong with the quality. I just didn't like the taste, the flavoring. But there was parts of it that I did like. And so I remember, saying to my wife, love this food, love the ambiance, love this brand new restaurant. Everything's clean. The servers are really happy and friendly. We're having great conversation, but I just don't really like that dish. And yet I'm going to take the good and I'm going to leave the bad. And I'm not going to sit here and complain because I made the menu selection and there's nothing actually wrong with what they brought out. But here's what I've discovered a lot of people do. They stress out over things like that to the nth degree. And I know that's a silly example, but it's kind of like life is bringing you all kinds of dishes, okay? You know it as well as I do. Some of them you ordered, okay? So you got no one to blame. But some of them you didn't order. It's just the dish that life brought you. And, you can stress out and say, well, I don't like every little thing about it. I don't like the context, the contours of it. I don't like how it looks. I don't like the presentation. I don't like the texture. I don't like the flavor. I don't like the amount of spice. I don't like the color. I don't like this. I don't like that. But, honestly, life is not going to give you everything you like 100% all the time. And I think one of the problems I've experienced in my life has been often I expect things to be perfect too soon without recognizing, remembering, kind of reflecting on the idea that fine wine takes time to age. And I'm not talking age in terms of years. What I'm actually talking about is allowing the things within your life to perfect on a schedule that you may not be the driver of. And that's okay. Right? Like good things take time to develop. And so what am I going to do? Sit here and stress out over everything in my life that isn't perfect? No, I mean, I could, but all I'm going to do is really wreck my mental health. And so what I think a better strategy to try is to just embrace the good. There's so much good around you. But then to minimize the bad. Don't fixate and definitely don't maximize the bad. So many people focus on the bad. Did you know that what you focus on, you will enlarge? And so, imagine if you focus on that 1 or 2 or 3 things that's bad and you completely minimize the 10 or 20 things that's good, what's going to happen to your mental health? Well, you don't have to be a psychologist to know that you have enlarged the bad and you've minimized the good. And how can that possibly lead to a good mental health outcome? It's just not possible. It's not logical. It doesn't make any sense. And so, in your life, like you're trying to build your business. Okay, there's good days and bad days. There's some sales calls you get off and you crushed it. Other sales calls you get off and didn't go so well. Sometimes you try to get a job. Sometimes you try to get a contract. Sometimes you actually do some work and it goes great. And other times you don't. What am I going to do? Am I going to sit there and fixate on all the things that don't work perfectly? No. I want to minimize those things. I want to maximize the good things, okay? So you want to handle stress. I'll tell you what, embrace the good. minimize the bad. The third principle for handling stress, which I think is so important, is stop waiting, get support right away. Now, this is an interesting thing. We, especially those of us who were raised without a lot of supports, I think this is one of the downfalls. Because if you're not raised with a lot of support, what happens is you learn to kind of, pull your stuff together and keep on keeping on. You're not that person who's constantly looking for someone to bail you out. You're not that person who's constantly crying wolf. You're the opposite. You're that person who waits until you're like right at the end of the line. You're just about to lose your freaking marbles. And then you finally dial 911. But at that point, it might be too little, too late. And what I would encourage you to think about is how can you surround yourself with people where it's not so much you're all crying on each other's shoulders, because I don't know that that's always the best thing either, like if that's all you do, but that you've got a couple of people who are there in your life who will celebrate your successes, but also be there to give you support right away when you need it. In other words, deal with the stress in a supportive way while it's still small, rather than waiting for it to get to a place where it totally takes over your life. Okay, so handling stress well, get support right away. Another thing about handling stress, and there's a big difference, by the way, between handling stress well and not handling stress well, is this idea of energizing rather than enduring. Now, I want to talk for a moment about the concept of resilience, because I think there's a lot of misperceptions and misconceptions and even misinformation out there about resilience. Resilience is not you enduring. It's you energizing. And those are two completely different things. A lot of us think that resilience is just you gritting your teeth and hanging on and just kind of pushing through and hating every moment of it. And if that's your definition of resilience, the problem is you will maybe do even more damage to yourself than if you actually try the other thing, which is energizing. Now, what do I mean more specifically? Listen, there are habits and rituals and routines that you and I, every one of us in our lives, have practiced at times in our past that energize us. For me, it's prayer, it's journaling, it's running, it's meditating on the scripture. For you, it could be hot yoga. It could be a great glass of wine with some of your closest friends. But the bottom line is there are habits and routines and rituals that all of us in our lives have that energize us. And so when you're dealing with stress, the most important question is honestly energy. Because you can't necessarily change all of the environment or all of the situation that you're in. And so you either endure, you just, okay, I'm going to just endure. And that, I don't know, is a great strategy long term. Or what you do is you constantly energize. And this is self-care on steroids. I'm not just like self-care, like, oh, I need some dark chocolate today. Like I'm actually proactively every day thinking about energizing. How do I make sure that I have enough energy today to perform at my best? Because I'm going to face stress, whether I like it or not. And so I need to make sure that there's enough energy in the tank to handle it. And I can tell you, friends, that handling stress is far better when you have high levels of energy than when you're just going through the motions, enduring. Okay, so handling stress well, energize, don't endure. Okay. The next thing about handling stress well is to not sweat the small stuff. Now, it's really interesting to me how much of our mental health gets broken. And I mean broken because we're sweating the small stuff. Now, at the end of the day, this is a subjective decision. What do I mean by that? I mean that what is small to you might be big to me. And what's big to me might be small to you. But over and over again as a coach and as a leader, I have seen people absolutely sweat the small stuff. What I mean is they put so much energy into, well, she didn't call me back. Well, he didn't text me back. Well, when I came in the room, they didn't immediately drop what they were doing and just run and give me a high five or a handshake or a hug. And it's like, and you're going to like let your whole day be wrecked because of a very small thing. A lot of the time, what ends up happening is we give all kinds of power to situations. We give all kinds of power even to people that we probably shouldn't do. And so we end up in this stress state, trying to manage everything, trying to micromanage everything, trying to control everything. And I think we all can appreciate that's a recipe for disaster. And so sometimes what you have to do, as the famous, Queen Elsa said, is you just got to let it go. And yeah, I'll tell you what, when you let things go, it's amazing how stress lets go of you. Okay, so handling stress well, don't sweat the small stuff. The next thing about handling stress well is this idea, and I just love this, is learning, this might shock you, but you got to learn to say no. Just say no. Now, what are we saying? Just say no to. Saying no and learning to say no to people and to projects that do not align to your goals. Now, when you think about it, everybody else out there, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people have an agenda for your life. You know it as well as I do. And they've got an agenda for you. They've got a bunch of things they want you to do. They want you to buy their thing. They want you to subscribe to their thing. They want you to come to their event. They want you to maybe do a bunch of tasks, do a bunch of jobs, handle a bunch of projects, do a bunch of things. That in and of itself isn't wrong, But where it gets wrong is when your addiction to saying yes overrules your good sense and judgment. And so you find yourself overcommitted and under-equipped. Okay, so what that means is I've got too much commitment and not enough time. I've got too many tasks and I have not enough energy. I have way too many promises that I've made and not enough capacity internally to fulfill all of those promises. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that you have to learn to say no. And I think, to be really honest, this was something that I did lots when I was younger. I think, if I was like even more honest, I would say that it was because I wanted to be liked. Now, I'm not going to say that I want to be hated now. I don't. But maybe one of the elements of maturity for my journey that has been most helpful is I just don't care as much as I used to, Like I want people to like me, and that it's really nice if they do. I don't want them to dislike me. But if they choose not to, I just don't care as much as I used to. And if they choose not to dislike me because I didn't take on their project or their task, well, I care even less. In other words, if they dislike me, just, maybe they don't like my hair or whatever, well, okay. But if they actually are like, I don't like you, Abe, because you didn't do the thing I wanted you to do, well, I care even less about that because, listen, I'm not owned by you. You're not owned by me. We all have a purpose and a plan. I believe that God has a calling on my life. I believe that God has a calling on your life. And so what does that mean? That means that there's already an agenda for me. I don't need you to tell me your agenda for me because your agenda for me may or may not line up with my agenda for me and even God's agenda for me. And so I think a lot of the times we end up getting really stressed because we take on all kinds of things that we really shouldn't have taken on in the first place. And so that level of stress is high. So what if you just looked at your to-do list? And I'm sure you got a to-do list. Now it might not be written down. Maybe it is. Maybe you got sticky notes like everywhere, Like I don't know how you organize your tasks. But I'd love for you to look at your tasks. And I'd love you to say, how many of these are my agenda for me? And how many of these are someone else's agenda for me? Now, hey, if it's your boss and he's asked you to do a bunch of things and it's all within the scope of work that maybe you're not that passionate about, well, maybe it is like actually needs to be a part of your agenda for you. Why? Because you want to keep your job, you want to get promoted, you want to get a raise. But oftentimes, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about everyone else in our life who has put all kinds of other agendas on us, and we're stressed out because we don't even have enough time to get to our own agenda. We don't even have enough time to get to our own projects. We don't even have enough time to get to our own calling. And so, of course, you're stressed. Like, how could you not be stressed when you're trying to do it all? So stop trying to do it all. Like, just learn to say no. Handling stress well is about learning to say no to people and projects that don't align with your calling and with your goals. Now, the next strategy that I'd love to give you for handling stress well is to remember the power of belonging. Maybe another way to put this would be to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with positive people. The stress in your life has a lot to do with the level of relationship and connection that you have. What I've discovered is that I can handle lots of stress when I'm not trying to handle stress alone. And now Virginia Satir, she said that we need 4 hugs a day for survival. We need 8 hugs a day for maintenance. And by the way, that's actually true. Several years ago, the UCLA did a study that found that people need 8 to 10 meaningful touches a day to maintain their mental health. I'm not sure how many you've gotten today, but if you haven't gotten your 8 to 10, please get that. So Virginia Satir, she said, we need 4 hugs a day for survival. We need 8 hugs a day for maintenance, but we need 12 hugs a day for growth. And, if you're trying to handle stress without getting those 12 hugs a day, can I encourage you to find some people in your life who are safe enough, who will give you that sort of safe, supportive, obviously, where you're feeling very comfortable with that kind of interaction, but those kinds of interactions that really nurture and feed your soul are so important for handling stress alone. And let me go ahead and give you what I call the secret strategy, maybe even the most important strategy for handling stress well, and that is self-compassion. Self-compassion. Interesting little observation that some of you, I'm sure, have discovered in your own life at times too, that you can find that you have far more compassion for other people than often you'll have for yourself. And so what's kind of crazy about that is not that we need to stop having compassion for other people, not saying that, but did you know that if you're giving more compassion to other people than you're giving to yourself, then that is an indication that you need to do a little bit of work on you. And, sometimes what I discovered in my own journey with stress is that I was experiencing excessive levels of stress because I wasn't taking time to give myself compassion. And when you look at giving yourself compassion, what does that mean? That means maybe taking a break. That means sometimes making sure you get your sleep. That means actually, doing exercise that energizes you. That might mean, being that kind of person who just looks at your to-do list and takes 5 things off it. Why? Because you just can't do it. And so what about giving yourself compassion? Could that help you when it comes to handling stress? I think that it could. I think that it could absolutely revolutionize the way you look at stress, the way you handle stress, the way you operate when it comes to stress. And so let me just go ahead and conclude by sharing with you some things for handling stress. Well, the first thing is if you're going to stress over your own stuff. Number 2, embrace the good, minimize the bad. Okay, number 3, don't wait, but get support right now. Number 4, energize rather than endure. Number 5, don't sweat the small stuff. Number 6, learn to say no, especially to projects and people that don't align with your goals. Number 7, remember the power that there is in belonging, in those close relationships. Remember, 12 hugs a day. And number 8, I'll tell you what, self-compassion is the secret strategy that can absolutely elevate your ability to handle stress well. Thanks so much for tuning in. Do you know what? Certified Flourishing Coach. We've got so many resources and tools available to you. So many of them are free, by the way. And I would just encourage you to go to our website, check out everything that we have there, reach out. I love to connect with you. Don't do life alone. Don't try to build your business alone. Reach out, get some help, get some support. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you in our next episode.